Hello and welcome to the BuildASoil 10x10 Episode 2 Season 3. I'm excited today because we're going to be germinating seeds. It's a big part of the process and we've been putting it off a little bit because it's the kickoff of busy season. We're lining out everything for BuildASoil and for the farm. We also set up a whole nother tent and we're documenting the BuildASoil 10x10 Vegetable Edition, and we're going to be sharing that with you as well. So we're ready to get started, and just like you at your farm or on your veggie garden or in your 10x10, 4x4, whatever you have, you've got to do a little bit of planning ahead, thinking about how am I going to make this all come together at the same time so that I get the results. We want the plants to be able to get germinated, get up and running to full speed gently, and take off into flower. We don't want to have them stagnate and wait to be transplanted. And so a little bit of forethought about your schedule. Other things to consider, okay? It's the beginning. Are we gonna have a time change soon? Is that gonna affect the way my lights are on or anything like that? Are we going on vacation soon? Is there a big trip for work or something coming up? If that's the case, project to yourself and think, is it in 2 weeks? Is it in a month? Does that affect anything I'm doing? For me, when we're doing the germination of seeds and it's here at the office, I always think, hey, is it coming up on the weekend? The first couple days after I put the seeds in, I really want to make sure the moisture stays proper. But for me, if it's Friday, I'm starting seeds and I'm not going to come in until Monday, that means that I'm going to have to take a special trip in here. So I might start seeds like on a Monday. That'll give me all 5 days of the week to be around them. For you, it may be a different story. It may be starting me at night instead of in the morning, whatever it is. Just think about it for a minute. With that mindset, we're going to be starting seeds, and we're not going to start all of our seeds. We're going to start most of them that we're going to be doing two things. One, finding the females that are going to go in here of our regular photoperiod seeds like we've always done. And then later, we're going to germinate the autoflower seeds. Reason being, those are feminized. We're not going to have to wait a certain amount of time to find out what the sex is and then transplant. And the goal with autoflowers is to transplant as little as possible and never restrict that root system so that we get the most explosive growth. And so if you mess things up and stunt their growth, you can't get that time back and then flip to flower later like you can with photoperiods. With photoperiods, as long as you have a healthy veg room and a lot of plants ready to transplant, it doesn't matter how long that took. You just take them, put them in your flower room, flip to 12-12, and it's ready to go. With that being said, that means I'm not starting the autoflowers today. Over here, we've got the soil that we watered from last time. I'm keeping a journal and logging everything. And you can check back on episode 1 to see what we actually did. You may not have noticed, but the last time the liner was getting dirty, we had no liner in here. And the reason why I want to mention it is Gorilla was super cool. They hooked us up with a free liner. I bought this 10x10 tent as a gift for my wife, and she used it in our workshop that was at our property. And then we ended up moving. So we had the tent for a couple of years. I ended up using it as well, even though it was a gift for her. It's kind of a joke, but when we moved, I took the 10x10 down and we brought it down here. At that point, the floor was kind of messed up from me using it for so long, so I ditched the floor instead of trying to scrub it, and that made it look kind of brand new in here. But the poles were exposed, and I always felt like we should have a liner, so I reached out to Gorilla, said, hey, I know you offer these liners, individually. I've had the tent for years. It's still held up perfect. I'd like to demonstrate on camera that these tents last forever, and if you need something, you can always buy the individual parts. And this liner will now protect the poles from getting rusted on the bottom from the humidity or any of the moisture. All I did was I just reached in here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a button right down here that allows you to pop this off. I popped it up and I set it down. I put the whole liner in, sunk it over the center pole here with almost no effort, and now we have a brand new liner. So Gorilla, thank you so much for giving us the liner. We'll just keep showing it off, so appreciate you. Let's get in and start some seeds. I was gonna talk about the quadrants, but we'll go into detail later on all that stuff. I wanna show you every quadrant, the whole story, just like we always do in the 10x10 series. But today, it's gonna take a lot of time to plant the seeds because we've got a lot of work. Let's go ahead and get the seeds started right now. We've got the Veggie 10x10, and we were already planting seeds for that. So if you watch that series, we just kicked it off, and we were planting thousands of tomato seed starts for our greenhouse. Because it's already set up, I'm gonna take advantage of the situation. These are the trays that I'm gonna use. Normally, we use like 18 cell or 50 cell, depending on the type of seeds that we're starting. And it makes it easy because you just go over here, you pour the soil on, you literally just scrape it off the top, and you're basically ready to go. What I'm gonna do is a little bit different, and you can use these trays. You can use the party cups you get at the grocery store. That's what these remind me of, and that's why they're my favorite, because when I first started, I would go buy a 100 pack or a 50 pack. Sometimes I'd get multiple colors, and I would just cut holes in the bottom. I would take the scissors, and if you have party cups, I would actually go around the edge like this and just cut a couple of holes, 2 or 3 around the cup, and keep going. I've had people that would like heat up metal rods and do a whole bunch at once. Either way, it was part of the process. And so we've kept that by offering these. We call them solo nursery gardening cups, I think, on the website, something like that. But you can use anything, okay? I'm just gonna use these, and the whole goal is to get the soil in there. So I'm gonna move this tray. If I were to take this tray, put it in there and fill it with soil, I'd have soil kind of all over the tray. And so instead, I'm just gonna do them one at a time. Main reason being, we're gonna be popping a whole bunch of seeds today, and they're really special seeds. So I'm gonna take the time to treat every one of these right and slow. I've got them in this DVD case because some of them came that way in the mail. These ones that have no label here, these are the special seeds from Coot. I mentioned it. What I'm gonna do is an episode where I have more time and go into detail about the explanation, and Coot did a little write-up with all of the information behind the seeds. I'll be able to put that up on the video so that you guys can understand exactly what we're running here and how special it is to me. So Coot, if you're watching, thank you so much. We're really, really looking forward to this. So there's a couple of things to mention as you're gonna get started. The soil in here, it's been open in the air like this, and it's not moist. It's not dry. There's a little bit of moisture down there, but on the top, it's pretty dry. And so I've got to consider that. Do I want to add the moisture in here, get it ideal, feel it out, and then put that in the cups? That's a really good way to go. And if you're new to starting seeds, I would almost recommend taking the time to do that, because over and under watering can be the source of the beginning of problems when it comes to germinating seeds. They're gonna be your little pets. Sometimes you'll have spent $100, $200, a lot of money on some special seeds. You'll put them in there and then you'll just drown them with water and they can get some rot. Or you'll be so worried to overwater them that you just won't. And so I think that one way to kind of fix that is to pre-moisten the soil. The only challenge is if you do it right away, you might overshoot it and it's soggy soil and now you can't plant your seeds. So I would say take a little bit of soil out of a big bag like this, put it in a bucket if you're only doing a few seeds, and you can just add a little water, work it with your hands, get it just right. I'm gonna show you how basic this can be. I'm gonna put dry soil right in the cups, and then I'm gonna water it. And we're gonna literally leave it as it is. I'm not gonna cut this into multiple steps of moistening and getting weird on it. We're just gonna go for it. So this is BuildASoil Light. I've got a 1 yard sack here, mainly because we were doing thousands of seeds. I'm just gonna grab my cup. You can either scoop the cup in there, just throw it with your hand. If I just go like this, and it's full, and I put my seed in and I go to water, it's gonna not have room to pool up in the edge. Water's gonna spill over the sides. It'll create a channel where it'll always go out, and you might not have your water actually going into the soil like you want it. So I recommend leaving a little bit of a lip so that when you water, it can pool up just a bit and make sure that it stays in the cup. And I'm gonna tamp them down. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's kind of dry. And if I just have really fluffy dry soil, I put a seed in it and then I water it, that seed's gonna just run around in there and potentially go way too deep. And then it might rot in there because it can't pop through the top. So I will tamp it down. I'll put it here, I'll grab the next one, scoop it. See how it's not quite as full as I want? I'll add a little bit more, and that's really gonna be my workflow. I'm gonna try and not slow down too much. I'm just gonna get going and get this done. So we just finished filling all of these cups with soil yesterday. That's where we left off. Today is a new day. You can probably tell I'm wearing different clothes. My face is a little beat up. I do jujitsu, and sometimes that happens, but since we're splitting the video kind of awkwardly, I figured I'd mention it. And it goes along with our philosophy as far as the BuildASoil way. You know, the gardening is part of a mental process that's more important than just getting the harvest, right? A lot of us know that there's many ways that you can grow, but it's about that personal growth at the same time. A lot of us choose living soil because it's a challenge. It presents new things to learn. I think things that are important to mental health are things that you could potentially never master in your entire lifetime. And it's more about the process than it is the ultimate destination. Gardening is really good for that. Jiu-jitsu is something that I really enjoy. I encourage you guys to find something that is helpful. And the old joke with gardening comes to mind when I think about it. It's the better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. This feels like it creates a real independence and gives you self-confidence when you have the ability to produce from scratch. BuildASoil's goal is to create independence, not dependence. And if we were to go away and the lawn and garden stores closed and the hydro shops were disappearing and there was literally no resources you could get and you still had to grow your own food, if you listen to our soil building and fermentation and you have some minerals around or you already have a garden, I think you're gonna be in a significantly better mental space and that it's totally doable. So take it for what it's worth. I wanna get started on finishing this up. So I've got the soil. Where we left off, I scooped it out of the bag. If you overwater once the seeds are in, it's kind of too late. And so a lot of times you can kind of game it by pre-moistening these and coming back a couple hours later and checking if the moisture made it all the way through, if it feels too heavy. I'm not gonna do that because it's not always necessary. I'm just telling you that if you go back on YouTube and look at BuildASoil seed starting and some of our videos, we have several of them. I go over theory of seed starting. We actually show you several different ways to do it, and I've done it many, many times. I oftentimes try and narrow the margin of error by talking about the moisture and all those things. Today, I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna keep it really simple. We're gonna be direct sowing seeds. The soil is dry out of the bag. We've had this open for a while because we've been planting thousands of seeds. And when we go to moisten them, I'll discuss how much water and how I'm determining that. But I just wanted to show you that these don't really need anything special. In nature, obviously, nature wouldn't get 100% germination rate all in the same day. That's not the way nature works. But under ideal conditions, just direct sowing, you can get really good results. And most of the time with cannabis, people avoid doing this because they've spent so much money on seeds that they feel like they have to use a paper towel or they have to pre-soak and use fulvic acid and all this stuff. And I really don't think any of that's required, and I want to show that to you. However, if you're feeling uncomfortable about direct sowing, you don't have to do that. Check out our previous videos where we pre-soaked the seeds in like a shot glass of water to make sure that they really absorbed the water. The reason I did that and taught it as a beginner method is because if you don't keep these wet properly and the seed dries out after its initial soak, it can either kill your seed or it can prolong the germination. And because that is you have to have some experience to kind of understand where that's at, I recommend maybe doing the pre-soak. But if you're with me, you want to try this, you've got seeds, maybe practice with some tomato seeds, I think you're going to be really impressed at the germination rate that you get when you just direct sow. And there's something magic about the seed being right in contact with the soil and not being disturbed through its entire germination process. So let's get going. I packed them all, making sure that, like with my 4 fingers, because this soil is dry, that it's tight. It's not loose in here. When I go to mist the water, I don't want it to be so loose that it creates a soup and my seed spins around. I want the water to just move through it, and that takes a little bit tighter soil. And so I went through and packed them all, but I'm just gonna show you on camera how I'm double checking everything real quick, making sure none of them are too fluffy. So here's how I get started. You can just use your finger and you can just make a little hole, and I'll show you that right now. A lot of times I'll just do that. I barely put it down. Rule of thumb for me is that we don't wanna bury it really more than 2 times the depth of the size of the seed. About that big, I'll show you what they look like. I don't wanna bury it 3 or 4 times that deep. I just wanna go 1 to 2 times that deep at best. What I know from experience is even if you make a hole that's the depth required, when you go to mound the soil over it and push it down, it goes slightly deeper. So your hole really is just an indent when I do it, and I kind of push some soil over and push it down flat, and that creates the perfect depth on here. I almost could set the seed directly on the soil and push the seed in gently. Sometimes the seed sticks to your fingers, the only reason I don't like doing that, and then you end up lifting the seed back with you if there's any moisture. So let's grab some seeds. Start with the first one that I've been really wanting to plant, and that's Coots seeds. We're gonna call these the Pakalolo 1 or the 1 Pakalolo. We'll write up the whole write-up on the seeds and explain the origin behind it. And so for me, that means that I've just got to write the name down, and I write it completely on 1 cup, and then the rest, I usually just use the initials. So if I have to remember really quick what the initials were, I just look for the cup that has the full name on it. This is about making sure we get enough germination across all of these different seeds, and then we're going to do some DNA sex testing using Farmer Freeman Easy XY testing, which we'll be talking about. We'll probably put a link up in here, but we've used him in the past. He's going to do a DNA test when these are very young, and we'll be able to separate the males. At that point, we're going to talk about our little breeding idea of kind of chucking some pollen, as well as separating the females and selecting those. So we'll have lots to talk about. Let me open this up. Got the seeds right here. Before I do this, I'm going to mix up my water that I'm going to use to spray in here. And that way, when I'm done, I can use this to pre-mix the Bavaria Bassiana, which I kind of want to talk about as far as a way to coat the seeds. So let me use this as a reminder. I'm going to set this right here, and I'm going to come back to the seeds. I've got a bucket of water here, and it's just filtered water from our 10-stage water filter. I'm going to mix up what I'm going to be saturating these with and let that just sit while I plant the seeds, and then I can come back and use it. So I'll get that started right now. I've got a bucket of water right here. I'm gonna put the wetting agent in there first. Today we're using the J Plant Speaker Cuyaha extract powder, and this is saponins from the soap bark. And there's, soap nut, and there's the yucca. This is my favorite. It's really, really high percentage saponin, 65% on this batch, which is pretty good. And this is 1/8 of a teaspoon per gallon. We've got 3 gallons of water in there. And for those of you wondering, we've got our journal right here. I'm gonna write all of this down in today's entry in our journal so that you have this in writing and you know what we're doing. You don't have to keep the notes while you're watching along. As far as the measurement goes, I've got 3 gallons, which means that at 1/16 of a teaspoon, I need 3/16 of a teaspoon. I'm just gonna say 1/4 teaspoon or eyeball something close to that. It's not a fear of overdoing it. It's just that I want it to be cost effective, and this stuff should go a very long way. You don't need to be wasteful with it. So got the teaspoon mark on there. I just don't want to go above that. That's probably a little too much. There we go, a little less than 1/4 teaspoon. Just gonna sprinkle that in. This is used to keep like the foam head on like organic sodas, things like that. It's a food grade ingredient. And I've tried a lot of other powders, which we'll do a separate video and discuss it. This is the best I've ever found. And I'm really happy that we have this one. That's all the saponin, creating that foam. And I like to mix it in there, especially when the soil is dry. Because the soil is dry, it gets what we call hydrophobic, where it doesn't want to take the moisture on. It almost repels the moisture because it's so dry. And that's a tendency of peat moss. And as soon as we get that wetting agent in there, the Cuyaha, and we actually water it slowly with a mist, it's going to receive that and be forced to wick it up like a sponge, in which case it'll hold the moisture from side to side, and it'll be less likely to create that swirling soup effect in the soil because it's gonna go in so sponge-like. So I think it's one of my most important ingredients to have some sort of saponin or wetting agent. You can use aloe, you could whip up some alfalfa water, it gets kind of foamy. So many things have saponins, but when it gets down to it, this is the most direct way to go, easiest to use, and so that's why we're grabbing that one off the shelf. Next, I wanna add some microbes. The root wise, we've talked about a million times, but I like to do it right at the initial germination or when there's roots, sometimes soon. You can do it once the seeds pop. The idea is to get any microbial in connection, especially when it's a mycorrhizal base that has to create this symbiotic relationship with the plant. Now, when I'm doing 3 gallons of water, 4 or 5 gallons of water, the initial inoculation rate is kind of the strongest dose. Otherwise, you're gonna follow the per volume of soil application, which is the best way to use this as far as financially responsible. I'm just gonna go with a strong dose. That's a tablespoon into 5 gallons. So I'm gonna do a 1/2 tablespoon on here. A 1/2 tablespoon right there. Doesn't have to be perfect. That's what I'm going for. Just gonna put this right onto the foams, and then I'm gonna stir it. Got a little piece of bamboo here, works great. Now this is gonna kind of reanimate. There's living organisms in here, and there's some basic food sources in the root wise to start feeding them when they hit the water. And so now that's gonna start to come alive in the water before we apply it. You can use it right away. You can let it sit for a little bit. I've got the Rootwise Biocatalyst. This is an enzyme. This kind of supercharges the microbes. Normally the microorganisms in here would have to come alive, start eating a food source to generate enzymes. This is the enzyme that they would produce, and so it's just speeding that process up a little bit. Seed germination is an enzyme-based activity. Seeds produce their own enzymes to do this. This is why we've talked about sprouted seed teas, lots of other things. It makes sense to me to use enzymes at that point. Using this, it's 3 to 5 milliliters per gallon. 15 would be the high dose in here. So just above 10, I'm gonna go a little conservative, and that's the Rootwise enzyme. Dump that in there, stir it up. I mentioned we're gonna keep it simple this time. You don't have to use any of this stuff. I want to reiterate that again as we go through this series. We distribute gardening products. I pick and choose my favorites. I love doing it. But at the same time, I don't want you to think that you have to have every one of these things just to germinate seeds. The seeds of the soil have everything that they need to get the job done. One of the things I've noticed on like commercial scale or when you're doing lots of things, you'll see these outlying things that happen. And we can prevent some of the problems by being a little more disciplined and using some probiotics, but it's not needed. I just feel like they make a difference, but realistically, people have been doing this for thousands of years without any of these products, and it works great. So just remember that as we go through this series. I've got some BB Plus here, which if you don't know what this is, we do a more detailed video on Beauveria bassiana. It's a endopathogenic fungi that has a symbiotic relationship with plants. And the way that we offer it is as a natural plant symbiont that is really good for it. It's similar to Rootwise in that way, but this is only one species. Rootwise is important because it's very diverse and more represents what a healthy farm would look like. That being said, if you research Bavaria Bassiana and you watch our video separate on YouTube where we do a product highlight, it'll give you some good research points to look for. And I think once you start Googling it a little bit, you'll feel like we do, and that this is a very special product. It's worth learning about. I'll leave it at that. What I want to do to most cost effectively use this is like an ounce per acre. And the dry powder is typically used on a farm to put in the seed box with the seeds so that you're planting the beneficial ingredient right with the seed, right in the furrow. Instead of me sprinkling a little bit in each hole, I'm already doing that work when I put the seed in. So I'm gonna put a little powder in here, put my seeds in there and spin it, and as I grab the seeds, it's gonna be inoculated. You know, it's all the labor in one step, and it's the most cost-effective use. This is only an ounce per acre, so I mean, very little bit. Show you what it looks like. I'm just gonna add some of the powder in there. Grab these seeds. I always wanna pick good seeds if I have a choice, so I'm gonna try and pick the best ones. They all look really good though. I'm gonna put those right in here. Give it a little swirl. See how the seeds are coated? That's all I'm looking for. Now I can grab the seeds out and start to put them in here. I'm going to pre-dibble it is what they call it. They make these little dibble sticks. They come in different sizes for different seeds. I don't think you really need to buy anything. I just wanted to show you something. We just grab masking tape, which you should have a roll. It's easy to label everything with this. We've already got some of these labels on these cups, which we're gonna talk about. I don't think there needs to be a barcode on every single cup, but I'm just gonna use that to write right on here and label them. I'd like to, at least for this, because there's gonna be other people around, I wanna make sure that I label every single cup just in case something gets moved around. Other tricks would be to kind of film them on the day you plant and tell yourself which one's which, and make sure that you have some way to recollect this in case something goes wrong. So these are the 1 Pakalolo. I'll at least get started on that here, and I'll make sure that they're all labeled before I add all the moisture. Then eventually, as you start to separate which ones you're actually gonna grow and you're planting them, you can number them. So each seed could have a different number. And what we're doing here, they call pheno hunting, but really it should be called genotype hunting, not phenotype hunting. And we can talk a little bit more about that. I'll explain it, I've mentioned it a few times. So anytime you're looking through seeds and you hear phenotype, that represents the genotype or the genetics as well as the environment. So if you were to grow something here in Colorado where it's higher altitude and cold, and then you grew something, you know, by the ocean somewhere where it's humid and a little bit warmer, you're actually gonna get different flavors and colors and different structure out of the plant growth. That's called the phenotypic expression. And that's what would be called the phenotype. It's literally the genetic that you grew in the environment, the result that you're looking for. So pheno hunting, I don't think is accurate. We're all growing them in the same environment. So because we're looking for differences in each seed, which would be the different genetics, it's DNA, all of the different combined alleles. Like if you look up what makes blonde hair, blue eyes, or brown hair and different color skin, all of that's genetic based. Same thing in plants. So the genetics are literally that exact seed's the only one with those exact genetics. What you don't see until more breeding is done is the recessive genetics that are lying underneath there, which can either be exposed in different environments, the phenotype, or they can be opened up when crossed again, and you can find those. That's where the breeding work comes in. But as far as a genotype concerned, each one of these has unique genetics. That's why we're geno hunting, not pheno hunting. And as far as being able to track that back to a particular seed without getting lost, we usually label these. And I typically do that after I separate males and females so I don't have big gaps in my numbers, but it really doesn't matter. You're basically gonna label it and then put a 1. Number 2, number 3, number 4. Then when you keep clones of them and moms of them and you find the best one, you go back to, ooh, that was the number 4. You go back to the number 4 mom, and you're able to reproduce what you're able to locate and track down as far as the genotype. Then you can pheno hunt it, so to speak, and be like, well, does it like it cold? Does it like it hot? What happens if I grow it long and short? And you can coax out the different responses from your chosen favorite plant and see if there's a better way that suits your preferences. It's part of learning. It's part of like having a relationship with these plants, and I encourage you to do it. That's part of the beauty of planting seeds. So it looks like these will need, I think all of these are from a previous run. We just reuse these. Don't throw them away. They last a long time. I'm gonna label this on masking tape, so I'll get to show you what I do. Ideally, I like to have these clean of debris, so the tape sticks, but the masking tape works pretty well. I've never had an issue with it falling off. There we go. I've got my Sharpie that I'm gonna use as the dibble. I've already made sure that these are all packed down how I would like. I'm gonna go through it. I'm just gonna make a very small indentation. I mean, it's not very deep at all. It's just so that the seed sits there and I can easily cover it when we go back, and I'll show you what that looks like as I go. If there's a piece of pumice there or something, it's not to worry. I just kind of wiggle it out of the way. These seeds will literally grow out of concrete if done right. Our main concern is making sure they hold moisture. You'll notice like after you depress it with your fingers, the center is already slightly lower, and it can trick you, and you can accidentally bury these too deep, and then they won't be able to fully pop through the soil and you can lose a seed. We don't want to lose any seeds, so I'm gonna go shallower. I can always push it down. I can always just, I mean, it would germinate on the surface if you just kept it moist enough. I've got the seeds already here mixed in the Bavaria Bassiana Plus. I'm just gonna start plopping these, and Coot, if you're watching, we said we'd pop these seeds, and I'm really excited you gave them to me, and we're getting started today. So I've got 2 seeds in my hand. I don't worry if I grab more than 1 as long as I'm watching and feeling. So there's 1, 2, I'm just dropping them in the hole as I go. Doesn't matter, with this gray powder, you can kind of see that there is a seed in there, and that's another benefit of doing that, which I like. And like I said, we're putting this Bavaria Bassiana in each hole without doubling the amount of work we're doing just by putting our seeds in there. If you have a little seed bag, you can just pour this in the bag and shake the bag up. You don't have to like pour it out into a shot glass. No more seeds in there. I didn't over count or anything. That's great. I don't want to mix up the seeds. That would be horrible if I had 1 seed in there and I poured in another pack of seeds and then I got confused. So there we go. I've still got more for the next batch of seeds. I've already checked there's no seed in there. Here's the last step. It's gonna be the same for the rest. We'll probably just put the camera on like high speed and I'll go through and do the rest of these. There's no real reason for you to watch me label all of these and do the same process. Here's what it looks like. I've got the seed in the hole, and all I need to do is cover it slightly, and I need to pack it down tight enough so that when I missed it, it doesn't move the seed out of location. And so I just go like this and I tuck it in, is what my wife called it. I like that. Just tuck it in and then I push it down. That's it. Be careful if there's moisture here. When you go to pack it, if the soil sticks to your hands, it could bring the seed up with it. Just really make sure you're paying attention to that, and that's all you have to do when you're tucking them all in. This time I'll go top to bottom, left to right. Just tuck it in, push it down. 4 fingers like that, I can kind of just tamp that area and it should stay. I'm going to get the rest of these planted so that I can water them all at one time and just go through with the wand and hit them all. So I planted the Pacololo one from Coot. We'll have more information on those so you understand what we're doing. I had these in the fridge. I took them out of the fridge, kind of signaling them that they're coming out of winter into springtime, ready to get planted. 2 packs of McCormick's Authentic Genetics, the NL number 5, so Northern Lights number 5. We're gonna pop both these, and then we're gonna pop the Beefcake D, which you can see right here from Dominion Seed Company. That's what we're gonna pop today. The other autoflowers and the feminized seed that we're gonna run in that quadrant, that'll be done at a later date, so look for that episode in the future. I'm going to start off, I think, with the NL5, so I'm gonna dump those in and just get going. Now essentially everything's ready to go. Got them all labeled. I even moved a few around. So if you notice, what I did is I just put the space that I had in between them so I could tell this is one type of seed, this is another, this whole tray is one. The reason I have open spaces is based on just how many seeds I had. Next step is for me to dump the bucket of solution that I made, which you can just use plain water, and I'm gonna put it in my Chapin watering can. If you don't have a Chapin, you can get a plastic watering can from like the local garden store. It's fine, they work great. The reason why we use these is those break pretty quickly, and this has become kind of a flagship. For whatever reason, we've all used these for a long time. So you don't have to have that. The idea is to gently mist them. I even know some people that get one of those like squirt bottles at the grocery store and they literally just spray every single one. It will hurt your hand, so I think it's better to get the right tool. What I don't want you to do, especially using this method, is go try and pour some water on. It's going to move the seed too much. So if you only have that, I want you to pre-moisten your soil. Pack it in there, put the seed in and tuck it, and just don't do anything else. But if you've got a watering can that can mist and you've got a wetting agent, this is a great little hack that speeds things up. We've been using the same formula for starting the seeds in the veggie tent. Now, if there's a little foam that just stays on here, you can pour it in, or if you don't have room, you can leave it out. Another trick is just to mix it right in the can. I'm gonna shake it up just to make sure that we've got everything fairly well mixed in there. I'm gonna use the 1 gallon per minute nozzle from the Chapin that comes with it. What I'm gonna do is focus on doing this in several waves so as not to oversaturate and move the seed on the initial wave. Gotta pump it. It's gonna kind of make a mess. I've got the tables set up for it. That'll allow me to hit the initial soak without spraying directly into the soil, disturbing the seed. Now that everything's getting wet and it's kind of holding that moisture, I can go back through and make sure that each one has about the level of water that I'd like. Now, I could put a lot more water in here. This soil is dry. So if your soil is moist, don't do exactly what I'm doing because you might overwater it. Mine's really dry. So at this point, you can pick it, you can feel. You could also do one like this with no seed in it. You can kind of do the same thing and then dig around and see how deep the water's going if you're unfamiliar, right? But you don't want to dig around in these ones that you've already planted. You can see all the foam from the Q. It also shows you where you've watered last because that foam stays around for a little while. See how I'm barely disturbing the soil? It's not like that seed is moving around in there, which is really good. I could have wet the soil, but I just want to show you every method if you're curious. Another thing that I'm thinking about while I'm doing this, we've had a number of scammers come onto our YouTube channel and they're posting and putting like a WhatsApp phone number saying you've won a prize or text me at this number. BuildASoil is never going to do anything like that. If we do, it'll be a lot more publicized, like we're having a contest coming or something like that. So please be aware, if anybody is asking anywhere in these comments, purporting themselves to be BuildASoil, it's not my account. It's a fake little BuildASoil logo and it says text this number, you've won something. Please don't participate. Let us know right away. We're flagging it as soon as we can, but we'll never ask you to WhatsApp us and we'll never ask you to Cash App us, ever. Our soil is a little heavier than others, but once you get used to any of them and you know what it's like when it's wet or when it's dry, you can kind of just factor that in your brain, you know? And then as you go along later, instead of just watering the whole tray, because some seeds will pop earlier than others and they'll use water faster, they'll visibly dry out faster than the others, but as we go through this, it helps to remember that weight, target weight, and pick it up. I remember what it's like bone dry. In fact, I have that right here. So I can feel that, feel this, feel that this is slightly heavier, but it's probably not wet all the way to the bottom. I can see it's dry there, it's not really dripping out, but if I just go blast this, it's gonna move the seed. So my main goal here, keep the top wet through the entire germination. If I have it soaked like it's muddy in water, and then I keep having to spray the top because the top dries out from my grow light, it's gonna germinate into a toxic, anaerobic, overwatered environment. I'd rather have it moist all through the top, and each time I water, it just keeps going a layer deeper. By the time the seed germinates, it's perfectly moist in here. You don't really need any grow light until they germinate. The radiant heat from the light will tell them which way to go and act like nature, I think. So I like to put a grow light on them, but it can be dim. It doesn't need to be bright where it bakes your soil. The other consideration is we're gonna put it in a grow tent, we're gonna kick the humidity on and make sure it's ideal in there. So the entire tent is basically the right temperature and humidity. We've talked lots about that. We'll discuss the temperature and humidity. Seedlings like it wet and warm. So if you can get it above 80 degrees and in a similar humidity range, 70 to 80%, that'll give you really good results. If it's drier, like here in Colorado, my fear is that the top millimeter of soil, the top centimeter of soil is gonna dry out. That's where my seed is. It'll either delay germination or cause death of the seed. And so oftentimes we'll recommend a dome. Like I think I have one right here. When we do our cloning videos, we've used these. Some sort of tray and dome works great if you don't have a humid room. So that'll keep your seeds moist so you don't have to water them. The other alternative, if it's dry, you have no way to add humidity, and you don't have a dome, is to add mulch. A lot of times what we'll do is sprinkle a little bit of straw in here. That'll stop the light from baking the soil. A fear when you're brand new is that you'll mulch too heavy, the seed won't push through. So the easiest way to do this is just to add a little more time per day and check on them. Once in the morning when you get up, check them at lunchtime if you have the chance. Otherwise, dim your lights during the day or turn them off. You could always, at the end of the day, check them again. What we're trying to do the first 2 days before they germinate is just make sure it stays wet. So if it starts to dry out at all, you'll just spritz it a little bit. That's it. If you don't have a dome, you can just spray the top. Have a mist bottle right here, spray a little humidity on it. That'll make sure that we keep it wet. If your soil is already soaking wet and it's dry out and it dries the top and you keep adding too much water, that's the one thing we want to avoid, because then they'll just be waterlogged and heavy, and a brand new, when it's to life, does not want it to be that way. In fact, once they germinate, I'm a lot less worried about the proper watering. Now it's okay if it's slightly on the drier side. These seeds are going to explode with growth pretty quickly, and they'll tell you what they need. But it's a big day. Seeds are hitting soil. We're going to be sex testing these. We're going to be removing some of them, so we're not going to grow all of these here. But we need to start with a high number of seeds here to eliminate some of what we don't want and really search through the genotype there, and make sure we find something worthwhile. See how the water's starting to come out the bottom now? Okay, that means that I'm probably hit my target saturation for these now. I'm gonna feel that weight, take mental note of it compared to the empty one. And with that, we're just gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna move these into my grow tent. We're gonna put them in the 10 by 10. I've got a little table like this that's already clean, it's set up in there. I've got an LED light above it, and I'm gonna just dim it down on the lowest setting, and I'm gonna slide them in there. We're just gonna leave them. As I mentioned, we're gonna fire up the humidity. We'll be discussing the environment as we go through in more videos. This is what I really wanted to cover for episode 2, is germinating the seeds, kicking this whole thing off. And as we get to episode 3, we're gonna discuss the humidifier, the cover crop, really getting the whole grow room started. With cannabis seeds, it's typically a 3 to 5 day germination. Occasionally, you'll get one that pops up the first day or the second day. In my opinion, that usually means it had a slightly thinner seed coat. And I prefer something that really does take the normal amount of time to fully absorb the water and pop, but I've found no indication that that means anything. In other industries, like the first seeds are the ones you don't use. Sometimes the first seeds are the one you do use. And I think every vegetable has some sort of different, maybe methodology from its past. Typically with cannabis, they're so expensive, we want to run every single seed we get. But an interesting thing to note, when we're planting them directly in soil, I'm not gonna go dig around in here at all. A lot of people like to do that, and that's totally fine, right? Like you can plant them, dig around and stuff, but sometimes you'll end up breaking the tail or moving the seed around where you can't find it. You have to dump the whole cup of soil out now and find this little seed and make sure you don't mess it up. Avoiding all that, here's where the faith comes in. You're just gonna relax. I think the first time I popped seeds, I put a grow light bulb right on top of a Tupperware within an inch. I cooked the seeds and killed them. I just was trying to like love on them and give them way too much. So we're gonna set it and forget it at this point. I'm gonna make sure they stay moist. And what's gonna happen is we're gonna get a little bit of that survival of the fittest here. We are geno hunting, and if they can't make it in this luxury soil with proper seeding and watering, then whatever seeds don't make it, we're not destined to be a part of our routine, and that is the beginning of the weaning out of the weaker genetics. So hopefully that makes sense. We're looking for the ones that want to be here, that want to be on the bus the entire ride and show the most vigor, strength, health, flavor, all those things. And it starts day one when you start to see the seeds pop. Later on, we're gonna discuss the plant sexing. We're gonna get into the grow room and start doing an environment. So look for those episodes to come in the future. And so subscribe to this channel so you know what's going on. Tell your friends about it. Please interact in here, put comments. And the other thing that we'd like to ask for this season that really helps the algorithm is if they see more likes. So hit the thumbs up or the like button that's on here. And if we can get some more of those along with the interaction, we wanna spread this mission as far and wide as we possibly can. It's all free information. We really appreciate you guys. Thanks for following along. Until then, I guess we'll see you guys on the next episode.